Greeting and salutations. I am Lloyd, a producer at LCD Productions, and I have come to share this new series of visual audiobooks with you, the listener, the supporter, the viewer. Together we will go on a journey like never before, fly to new heights with Project Aerospace, explore new land and cityscapes with photations, even change the dimension of time through the power of time-lapse photography from live to tape. We'll even travel beyond the mind's eye into worlds captured and generated through animation from Thumbs United daily animation series. As we together go on these journeys filled with photography and theater of the mind, I hope you remember the core belief that we hold, that anyone can become the master of art, meaning that it is not some born skill what makes someone good at being creative. It is a desire to practice and spend time being creative that creates the master. I hope that these films, photography, and stories inspire you to set some time aside and practice some creativity. I believe if we all spend more time creating and being constructive, the world would be a better place, a more friendlier and fulfilling place. Thank you for coming. Let's begin this journey. This is Live to Tape, recording in partnership with Project Aerospace for the visual audiobook, The Girl Aviators and the Phantom Airship. Chapter 11, In Dire Peril. "Oh, if we could only work around and land on the point," exclaimed Peggy. "There's a fine smooth field over there. In fact, it's all bare ground, without rocks or trees." "Yes, and Jeff Strokes is a wireless operator there, too," rejoined her brother. "Hello," he exclaimed an instant later. "The wind is shifting a bit. I almost got her head around that time." "Then there is a chance, Roy." "Yes, sis, but don't count on too much." Like a skillful jockey handling a restive horse, Roy worked the Golden Butterfly about on the shifting air currents. If once he could turn her nose toward the land, he was sure that he could be able to make her to the ground by driving the airplane down on a slanting angle. Once or twice while he stove with hand and brain against the elements, he caught his breath with a gasping intake so near that they had come to overturning, but thanks to the wind eddies on the point, it was possible after a deal of breathless maneuvering to get the airplane headed for the land. The instant he found himself in this position, Roy threw all his power, and then bucking the wind like a ship beating up to the windward, he rushed down through the night upon the point. As he did so, the rays of the slowly revolving light flashed brightly upon the laboring airplane. In the radiance it looked like some struggling night bird beating its way against the storm and darkness. As Peggy had said, the point was clear of rocks or bush, and the landing was made without much difficulty once the airplane had been turned. Just a ship can face the waves with a comparative security, so an airplane being driven into the teeth of a gale is secure so long as she does not broach to it. In other words, get sideways to the blast. It was touch and go with the Golden Butterfly for several minutes, though during that struggle with the elements, and two thankful young hearts rarely beat than Peggy and Roy's as they stepped from the machine and made it fast by pointing braces provided by the purpose. Hardly had she touched the ground before a door in the lower part of the lighthouse opened and the form of Jeff Strokes emerged. He told them that the struggle with the wind had been seen by the lightkeeper and himself, and he was warm in his congratulations of the daring young aviators. The lightkeeper, a grizzled man named Zeb Beasley, followed close on Jeff's heels. Come right into the house and heave some supper," he said warmly. "It's only a rough fare, but you're welcome. My missus will be glad to have you." Truth to tell, both Peggy and her brother were almost famished and worn out after the tension of the struggle with the wind. This being so, they were glad enough to accept the lightkeeper's kind invitation. Peggy's first action, however, was to hasten to the phone in the lighthouse and call up their aunt. Miss Prescott, who had been badly worried over their prolonged absence, was much relieved to learn that they were safe and sound. Mrs. Beasley, a motherly woman of middle age, took charge of Peggy while Jeff Strokes entertained Roy. Jeff said that he liked the life at the lighthouse, lonesome as it grew sometimes. When he felt blue, he just used to relive the monotony by talking by means of invisible waves with other operators. He willed many a weary hour in the manner, he said. Suddenly, in the midst of their talk, he excused himself and hastened to the small room in which his instruments were, the place filled with shiny, mysterious apparatus and networked above with wires was as neat as a pin. Someone's calling, Jeff explained. His quick ear had brought the faint tick-tick hardly audible to the untrained ear, which told him that the message was vibrating through the night. Slipping over his head a metallic apparatus, not unlike the telephone receiver worn by Central, Jeff began listening intently. Drawing a pad toward him, he was soon writing down the message as it was ticking off. Presently it was completed, by which time Peggy was one of his audience. Steamer Valiant, Captain Bridges of London, wishes to report a passing Rocky Point bound for Boston, read off Jeff. Nothing very exciting there. What are you going to do now? Asked Peggy, as Jeff, the message in his hand, turned to another table, one by which arranged some ordinary telegraph instruments. Send it by ordinary wire telegram to the head office in New York, he said. Why not send it by wireless? Asked Peggy. 2 months chance of a delay in getting cross-current, explained Jeff. We found that for quick transmission of ordinary business, that the wire is best, unless an atmospheric condition are just right. Suddenly, one of the telegraph instruments began crackling and clicking loudly. Phew, said Jeff, listening intently. There's something that will interest you folks. What is it? Asked Peggy eagerly. Wait a minute. I'll catch the last. Jeff listened for a few seconds more and faced about. Why, that message was a dispatch from Sandy Bay correspondents of the New York Planet to his paper, he said. It was an article telling of the Fanning Harding has completed a successful airplane which made a wonderful flight tonight in stiff wind. He says the Harding has formed a company and means to manufacture similar craft. Then there was a lot of tafty about what a fine young fellow Harding is, and how bright and so on. Wonderful. If it's true, I can vouch for that, said Peggy. I've seen his factory. It's out by Grid Gibson's shop. So that's where Gid is getting all his money, exclaimed Jeff. I saw him spending it like water in Sandy Bay the other day. Hester's got a lot of new dresses and hats, too. Peggy's heart beat a little faster. This sounded like a corroboration of her suspicions. Where could such a man as Gib Gibson be getting such a large amount of money as he seemed to have recently? But before she could ask any more questions, Mrs. Beasley announced supper. Speculation was rife in Peggy's mind as they sat down to the boiled sea bass, freshly caught, homegrown potatoes, and striking beans and other good things which the lightkeeper had designated as rough fare. Peggy was fain to admit afterward, and so was Roy, that never had she enjoyed anything so much as that meal in the old lighthouse, with the wind roaring about it and the rough, kindly faces of their entertainers smiling on them. Good-natured Mrs. Beasley soon after arranged sleeping accommodations for her young guests, and that night the young aviators slumbered peacefully, while above them the great revolving light kept steadily in slow circles, warning vessels passing up and down the sound of the dangerous proximity of the rocky point. The next day dawned bright and fair. The sea lay like a sheet of blue grass, with scarcely a ripple to mar its polished surface. The last trace of the wind had died down. We'll have no more breeze till sundown, announced Mrs. Beasley at breakfast. Like most men of his profession, he was an earnest and accurate student of the weather. After breakfast, Jeff Stokes, who had been on duty all night, was relieved by his assistant, a young man who boarded in the village and rode over to his duty on a motorcycle. Well, said Roy, after they had thanked their good-hearted entertainer warmly, I guess it's time for us to be getting home. But Peggy had noted a wistful look in Jeff Stokes' eyes as he stood by the side of the aeroplane, which examination had already shown to be none the worst for its buffering of the night before. Would you like to try a little flight, Jeff? She asked. Would I? Echoed the youth. Will a duck swim? Yes, I believe so, laughed Roy. And so can a certain young wireless operator fly. Gee, Roy, you mean it? Of course, if you're not scared. There was a mischievous twinkle in Roy's eyes as he bent over the engine. "How would you like a ride, Mrs. Beasley?" Mr. Beasley asked Peggy presently while Roy adjusted the engine. The weather-beaten old fellow fairly threw up his hands. "Land of Goshen, miss," he exclaimed. "I've lived on the earth and sea, man and boy, for 50 years. I ain't going to tempt Providence by embarking in a sky clipper at this late day." "You bet you ain't," put in Mrs. Beasley with deep conviction. "Why, if you ever done anything we'd be like to be read about in church, not but that it will be all right for young folk if they know how to manage the contraptions." Now then, Jeff, if you are ready, will you get in?" said Roy presently. The slender young wireless operator hopped into the chassis with alacrity, but this face was a bit pallid from excitement at the idea of a new method of locomotion he was about to test. Last goodbyes were said, and the motor began to whirl like a gigantic locust. There was a grinding and buzzing as the gears meshed and the airplane began to scud off. "For all the world like some big, pesky grasshopper," declared Mrs. Beasley as it scuttered across the smooth turf. But if the good lady was astonished, then it was nothing to hear her amazement when a moment later the butterfly soared up into the air, lifting as gently on the windless atmosphere as a bit of drifting gossamer. Up and up it swept in graceful hawk-like circles. "Dear Sue," shrieked Mrs. Beasley presently, "if it ain't got nothing out to sea. Just what they air," shouted her husband, shading his eyes with a wrinkled hand. "I never thought to have lived to see such a thing." Roy had been unable to resist the temptation to take a little spin out above the glassy scarlet heaving water, the gulls soaring above, viewed with amazement by the invasion of their realm by this buzzing, angry-looking monster. They flew about it shrinking. "Goodness, I hope they don't attack us," exclaimed Peggy. "Not likely," was Roy's response. "They think we are some kind of big bird, and I guess they want to have a game with us." As they swept on, all agreed that never had they felt such a feeling of exhilaration as came to them as they swooped and swung above the glistening blue water, for all the world like some huge bird. Once or twice motor boats went beneath them, and the occupants looked, at first in wonderment, and then in enthusiasm at the sight of the golden butterfly and her 3 young occupants presented. But all at once the steady song of the engine began to grow different. It skipped and sputtered and coughed. Blue smoke rolled from the exhaust, and the airplane began to waver and snag. Jeff turned rather pale. "What's the matter?" he gasped, steady his voice as much as he could as the airplane began to drop steadily down toward the water beneath them. "The gasoline's given out," rejoined Joy in a voice which was full of anxiety. "Oh, Roy, what shall we do?" Peggy grasped as the airplane, its propeller beating the air more and more feebly, began to descend with greater rapidity. "We have to volplane some land if we can, and if we can't, we must take our chances for it in the water," was Roy's grim reply. And that was Chapter 11. The next one's Chapter 10, What Happened on the Island. Thank you for experiencing this journey we have created here at LCD Productions. For more information on how to support these films and projects, visit photations.com/support. Fine art photography prints from journeys around the world can be purchased from photationsstore.com, and digital downloads of our photography and visual audiobooks is available for personal use. Commercial use is available at a different rate. Thank you for your time. I hope to see you here again.